Hey folks, welcome to Bear Mountain today. We're going to do a kind of a quick video on some things we're doing to prepare for our biochar for next fall. So let's get started. Okay, fall is a great time to get things pre-staged for things you might want to do later, particularly in the winter time, would be like making biochar for your vegetable beds or your perennial beds, or in our case, we're going to be using a lot of it in our tunnels. To help with, primarily for us, water holding capacity. Biochar has a great capability of holding water as well as nutrients, and depending on the fertility of the soil, the benefits you can see sometimes can be really rather radical, or they can just be in a general way of just helping things move along better. For us, like I said, from a standpoint in our tunnels, the biggest thing for us is more effective use of water and more retention of water in that rooting zone, and that's kind of what we're going for. Now, what we're doing this year is, as we're turning, just like we did last year, we're turning blackberry brush and other prunings that are a higher carbon content, meaning they're more brown than they are green, and we're going to be turning that into char. And we're going to use the same open pit burning technique we used last spring. We did a video on it. You can kind of check it out. We'll put a link up there. I always don't know which side to point to, but let's just say I think I point to the left. And that'll take you right to it. Shows you how we dug the pit, shows you the techniques that we used to burn it, and what the material looked like afterwards. But so our purpose today, though, is to say, hey, if you've got space and you've got time, and maybe you've got things that you want to get rid of and you want to get them dried out, particularly for us in our fall, we tend to have a lot of beautiful dry days and a few wet ones. But early fall for us tends to be drier than wetter. And so this is a great time. We started about 3 weeks ago, starting cutting blackberries, and we took this out of one section that we're trying to clear, and right in this pile here, we've got about probably 20 yards of material, or pretty close to it, that we're going to turn into char. We also have been putting in here other types of prunings of things that we've done on some perennials around the place, like rhododendrons and camellias, and a laurel that we did a pretty serious trim on. And so all those things are going to go into the process of making our biochar. So some of the questions that folks have is like, well, why do you go through all this effort to making char out of stuff? Well, you could, if you had a shredder, shred this material up and add it into a regular compost pile, and it would decompose fairly quickly. But since what we're trying to do is kind of stay away from adding and buying more expensive equipment to maintain, we can get a really good benefit on a hot burn of this material, releasing very little smoke, and turn this into a carbon that can be just as useful as a compost. So that's kind of why we're heading in that direction. And because we're out in the country, we have the capability of being able to do this a little less encumbered than, say, someone who might have a small urban lot, in which case that may make more sense, is to take brushy material you have and shred it up and use it for a surface mulch, or use it in your compost pile. Some of the other questions that come about is saying, well, what can you use? Basically, I think the rule should be, oh, excuse me, kitty cat. Oh, that was pretty. Guess somebody wanted to be held. Anyway, pretty much the rule is what you want to do is you want to use stuff that has a high carbon content. In other words, prunings off a perennial plant kind of tend to have that kind of characteristic. But a crop residue from an annual, like flower stems and flower heads and things of that nature, yes, you could make biochar out of them if you had a really good type of retort system. You could take green material and you can make a char out of it. But honestly, for what we're doing, anything that's green makes more sense for us to use it in either as a Jadam liquid fertilizer, if it's green and succulent, or add it to a compost pile, or use it in a surface mulch of some kind or another. So we don't tend to make a biochar out of grass or anything like that. What we do is we focus basically on what's coming off of perennial plants. One other question did come up in quite a bit, was people using, can you use like charcoal You know, like there are some companies that market a actual charcoal with no additives. And is that as good as regular biochar that you would make yourself, or that you purchase as biochar, which is significantly more expensive? Biochar, the interesting thing about this is it can have all kinds of different characteristics to it. One of the characteristics is that makes char is how much what we call volatile organic compounds. In other words, things that burn. Okay, are they totally, you know, is it heated up high enough that that material has been volatilized out of the material you're trying to turn into char, and has gone, either been consumed in the process of burning, or is somehow falls out as a condensate or something of that nature. But the point on making real good char is what you're trying to do is you're trying to have a very low level of volatile organics. Now, people who are selling charcoal to burn on your barbecue, they actually want those things left in the material so that the charcoal will burn better, it will light better, it will burn. True char, biochar, quality biochar, there's a really easy test to tell if it's good. If you take some of it that's kind of ground up and you rub a biochar that's marketed as biochar in your fingers, you're going to get a smudged mark. Well, if you take those fingers and then just run it under some gentle water, that smudge will come almost totally off your fingers. It'll wash off with the power of the water. If you're using a char that still has a high level of volatile organics left in it, it's not going to feel as dry, and it may even feel just a little bit like a little greasy. But when you run your fingers under water, you're going to have to actually use soap to get that black charcoal stain off your hand. That tells you right there that there's still a lot of chemical compounds in there that were not burned, and that there's a lot of pore spaces in that charcoal that's still occupied by that. So when you add those types of material to your soil, you can actually end up kind of setting things back a little bit, particularly if you put in a whole lot, meaning like more than 1 or 2%. It will eventually break down over time, but it's not necessarily the best thing for your plants. So we don't use or would recommend that if you're purchasing, you know, trying to get char into your soil, biochar into your soil, that necessarily that using a charcoal that's meant for cooking food is necessarily the right way to go. But that's just our personal opinion. I'm sure there's many people out there that have demonstrated success with it, so I'm just going to leave it at that. Our personal opinion is a higher temperature burn makes a better quality char. So the major thing is take advantage of fall. Take advantage of getting your stuff lined up. We're gonna once we get this pile a little bigger, we got a few more things to add to it. We're gonna put a tarp over it just to make sure, a piece of plastic over the top, make sure that it doesn't get wet and that it dries out. And then come November, once we get enough moisture in our ground around here that outside burning is an okay thing to do, we're gonna start making a lot of char. So anyway, folks, want to thank you for joining us today. Pretty quick video, just kind of giving you a heads up of something to do this time of year. So as
one of many fall chores.
Yep, it's one of the many fall chores to do. So thanks for watching, and stay safe out there, and we'll catch you on the next video. Bye bye.
Bye bye.